If you're in the market for a Mark 1 Focus and you've clicked on this link to watch this video, you might have come to the right place. Down the years there have been many YouTube videos done by many bigger YouTube channels on this car, quite frankly with a lot more credibility. But I'm going to give you a buyer's guide / review style from an owner's perspective, someone who has been around these cars for many years. Think of it as a celebration of what is good and not so good about the car, and what you need to know if you're buying, or even if you own one and you just want to watch another Mark 1 video, then you're the kind of person I love. For many years prior to the Focus, Ford had been mainly run by the accountants, who were very keen not to dip into the family coffers, and this severely restricted the engineering scope. The best example of this was the Mark V Escort. Ford hierarchy come to the conclusion in the 90s that they just couldn't keep producing substandard cars which were potentially hemorrhaging their customer base. This did allow for more engineering scope in which the Focus was designed and conceived. Initially the car was codenamed the C170. It was due to be released as the new Escort, but at the last minute they changed the name to Focus. The car was designed as a complete clean sheet engineering design from scratch by a team led by the late Richard Parry-Jones. It was Ford's first car designed to be sold worldwide with minimal changes in many markets, a first world car as such. The car was launched at the Geneva Motor Show in 1998 and then started production in September 1998 and finished all the way until 2005. The exterior design was basically a continuation of the new edge design first seen in the Ford Ka and Ford Kuga. The end result was just something very different from anything else on the market, with all these sharp, crisp lines being mixed together with straight lines at the front. It's all really coherent and rather crisp in the way that it all comes together. Every line on this car is completely different. Now, one important thing to note is look how round the front of the car actually is. Just have a look at it for a second, right? Now it is quite a round shape, isn't it? But when you look at the side of the car with this straight edged wing, forgive the sun, you can see that the middle of the bonnet is much higher than the edge, but that curve is deceived by this straight edge right down the side. Very deceiving. And you've got this as well, which also takes away the curve of the bonnet. So every line has a purpose on this car. Even the semi-elliptic crests over the front arch, that is there to break up the actual height of this wing and to make sure that it doesn't look again as curved, but it is incredibly curved. Another design feature at the front, look at the flow of the grille. It goes into the front lights. How cool is that? Have you seen this on any car where the grille actually flows into the lights? It may be a thing on modern cars, particularly with rear light clusters being integrated with the rear, but nothing on this age. Absolutely clever. Now again, as we go back and the bodywork flows towards the back nicely with these nice strips, and then the doors flow nicely back with this line going slightly up. You have this huge quarter panel on these three doors. Now you see this semi-elliptical groove over the arch. That is there to break up this quarter panel, because if you imagine that wasn't there, look how bulbous that the size of that panel would actually be. It wouldn't look very good at all. But that not only looks cool, but it breaks up the line. There is a curve here which also breaks up the line as well. Again, every line has a purpose on this car. And then at the top here, you've got this sweeping high roof line coming right down. Even on the, you know, on the 5 doors, it's exactly the same. You've got this line coming here, and then this line swoops down and meets it at these trapezoid. Let's just call them high level rear light clusters, something that had never been done before. There is a word for the shape of these. And they meet so nicely from the front. They curve right down, and it actually deceives you about the height of the car. Even though it's standing back, the car looks really tall, which is what it is. But when you've got this curve, it takes it out, and all your eyes are drawn to is the windows. You're not drawn to the height of the car, you're drawn to that shape because it's just such a nice curve. And obviously in between the rear light clusters, we have an integrated brake light assembly. Instead of it being in the car like on a lot of models, even models after this car was designed, they still put them in the car, but it's nicely integrated in the tail light. Now if you look at the rear of the car again, look at the rear light clusters and look at the shape in contrast with the back window. The back window stays in and comes out. The clusters come out and then go in. Two different curves going on in complete contrast to one another. Again, it just shows up so much joined up thinking from the front of the car to the back, with the high roofline, the curve that I've showed you, the semi-elliptic grooves, there's the line going straight across here, and obviously you've got a curve for the front arch, these lines here. Everything from front to back is completely joined up on this car. It's just, if somebody was learning about car design, this is the sort of car you look at to learn how to use a line to deceive the eye in what is, if you look at it, it's quite a blobby shape, isn't it? And a lot of people do see them as blobs, but the lines just take that whole element away. And the last note, look how curved the side of the car is. Look at that line, look how it goes up to the door, the driver's door, and then comes back in on itself. Every single panel is curved, and yet you have straight lines. Curves, straight lines joined together to make one very, very joined up piece of design work. Now, there are two distinct incarnations of the Mark 1, sometimes referred to as the Mark 1 and the Mark 1.5. The early Mark 1s have indicators within the bumper itself. The later ones, the post 2001 models, the facelifted models like this one, they have the indicators in the headlight units, which is probably much more neater and much more in keeping with the design, but each to their own. Some people prefer the earlier Mark 1 models. The only other difference as well is some body bumper mouldings on the later ones. The early ones don't have that. The earlier versions, again, they have sill covers, plastic sill covers, which tend to trap a lot of dirt and can cause premature rust. The latter ones like this don't have them. It is worth noting as well, the switchover between the Mark 1 and the Mark 1.5 models was around October 2001. Right, now this is where it gets quite interesting. The interior basically carries on the exterior design language in quite a big way, really. The Ford used a computer modelling software to create the interior packaging, incorporating much more taller doors and a raised roof lining to create that volume of space and air about it, and it certainly does that. It's almost got so much space in it that it feels like an MPV. Maybe that was the idea, I don't know. But we've got loads of curves and straight lines, again exactly the same as what you'd expect from the outside of the car. Everything is a completely different shape, but everything is in the right place. I'm going to take a look now. Now, looking at the dashboard, the first thing you notice really, first thing that catches my eye is this line that goes right across into the door cards themselves, and then it comes back down and then curves with the bottom of the front fascia. Obviously you've got quite a few instruments below that line, but there's quite a few things above that line. It's quite a nice balance to it, whatever's below or above that line. But again, it's exactly like the exterior, it's the Mr. Blobby effect. It looks quite a blobby, chunky dashboard really, but when you add in all these lines, it makes it far less bigger than what it actually is. Very clever design indeed. And obviously you've got this curve over the Speedo as well, which just adds to the dimension of the dashboard, and it adds a little bit of balance above that line. If that wasn't there as such, then it would be a bit bottom heavy. Right, I'll start from the left hand side. First of all, we have this fantastic electronic tailgate release, which is firmly in the palm of your right hand, where exactly it needs to be alongside the Speedo. That is a very useful feature, considering many cars still use a cable pull system for the tailgate, the boot release. And then next to it you've got this quite stylish rear vent, again with curves. Another feature of this car, just curves everywhere. That looks really cool, the way it's just slotted on the side. Again, the vents, I do think that these vents look quite different to actually the rest of the dashboard design. I don't think they look as if they're meant to go there. They should be a completely different shape, like a triangle shape. You would imagine that to be like a more of a curve than just the shape that they are, actually quite a concentric circle. And then below that you've got this typical Ford lighting switch, which is quite clunky, and yes, you get the warning lights if the door is open but the headlights are on. And then you've got the headlight adjustment motor, which I've set in the highest position. That quite works well. And then you have this dimmer switch for all the individual switches amongst the dashboard. Moving up here towards the speedometer, the speedo cluster is pretty much as you would expect. Again, a completely different shape. We have all of our instruments that we need, like we have a temperature gauge, we have a rev counter, we have a speedo counter, which is very optimistic, I would definitely say, even in European countries, and a fuel gauge over here, which can be slightly inaccurate at the best of times. And then above here, if I just turn the ignition on, oh come on Andrew, there we go, turn the fan off, we have all of our warning lights. Now it is important to note, if you have a pre-2003 car, you will have bulbs like mine. It will have physical bulbs in these warning lights. If your car is if it's a post 2003 Mark 1, it will have soldered LEDs into the board itself, so if they blow you'll need to find somebody handy with a soldering iron. Just a top tip. And then you've got your little mileometer counter, and you've got your trip, which I'm actually set to 0 now. It has literally just passed 90,000 miles today, on the day of this video. Oh my god, what a coincidence. By the side of the Speedo you've got this little cubby hole, which could be good for coins and all that. On higher spec models, that is where the trip computer goes. Before I move on, actually talk about joined up thinking, look at this shape. Does this remind you of the roof and the seam along the bottom of the windows going to the back rear light clusters? Lots of joined up thinking here. Alongside we have two vents, the center vents, and then we have a third vent over there with some ventilation again up there. Below the line we have this geometrically shaped front fascia, which I really like. These fascias come in a variety of different shades depending on what spec you've bought. Up here, first of all, we have this digital clock, which is adjusted quite nicely. These don't tend to go wrong at all, like on a lot of cars this age. The digits don't really disappear, they're very well made. You've got the immobilizer light here, hazard warning switch, and you have, on my car, because this is a Zetec model, you have a CD radio player, which is all quite decent really. I won't get done for copyright, but it's quite nice actually. It's still quite functional. These radios do tend to go wrong, and a lot of people replace them for aftermarket ones, but they're quite nice. And then down here we have the cigarette lighter, which is a 12-volt socket as well. Some models just got a cigarette port, but I have a 12-volt port. And then you've got this really neat little ashtray for keeping stuff to clean my glasses with. And importantly, a radio code. I do have that there because if you disconnect the battery, you're going to need that code. There's a serial number on the back if you can to get the code, if you don't have the code to hand. Anyway, we put that back. And down here we have manual heating controls, which are quite clunky. There is something to note, particularly on this one, the distribution one. There are cables that go to the rear heater. If these cables are a little bit on the stiff side, just get some WD-40, some lubrication, well actually not WD-40, GT85, and lubricate the cables, otherwise they will break. Heater resistor, if the heater works on all four like mine does, fantastic. If it only works on number 4, the heater resistor, which is located behind the glove box, that's gone, so you need to change that. It's a very easy fix, that. Down here we have a recirculation button, which basically forces air back through the heater and into the cabin and then out again through another viaduct, which is quite useful if you're sitting behind a car that's had a decat. Believe you me, that is the truth. And then down here we will have a rear heated screen for the back window. That always generally works very nicely. Sometimes the lines can break, but mine's in good condition and you can get a decent second-hand tailgate for nothing these days. And if you were lucky enough, you have the optional extra of a heated front windscreen. And obviously it won't turn on because you need to have the engine running. It sucks a lot of power. Now, when you turn this on, if you have got this feature, you can find that one side of the screen heats up and the other is broken. There are two halves to this element in the front screen. Don't worry about that too much. It's quite a common problem for them to go. You just get another windscreen, to be honest with you. That would be an ideal situation, but not everyone can afford one. But sometimes they can go, but they can also not work at all on either side. So it's just something to be aware of. They're a great feature when they're working. As we move, actually we can move just to the side. We have this glove compartment, which does have actually a shock absorber, believe it or not, to slow it down. I can hear it, but unfortunately you can't hear it. But there's a decent enough space in the glove compartment. You've got the owner's manual stuck to that, and there's a decent amount of space for all sorts of little things. And then as we move up here, we have the airbag, which is nicely mounted inside the dashboard itself. It looks quite integrated. I know, like on a lot of these 90s cars where you have a passenger airbag, but it looks like something that's sitting on the dashboard rather than in it. Rover 45s are quite bad for that. I think the airbag on Rover 45s tend to sit up quite, they look like someone's just plonked them on there, but this looks very nicely integrated. As we move, well, we're going to move up. We have some courtesy lights here, door open, which my door is currently open, so it's always on. And then we've got some typical sun visors, but sun visors are sun visors. The passenger one gets a window and it has a slider. I remember a certain Peugeot 205 that didn't have this door. It was just a mirror. So every time it was a sunny day and I was sitting in the passenger seat, I just kept looking at my own crotch, to be honest with you. Something quite important to note, I have missed this around the steering wheel. We've got this lovely airbag on these earlier models. The later 2003 onwards models get this rather bulbous airbag with a much bigger badge. I don't quite like them. I think they look a bit too big for the steering wheel. Around here we have column controls for the radio, which still work. If you fit an aftermarket one, these may not work without the correct adapter, but they're quite clunky, very 90s. That they make me feel a bit ugh. They're very nasty in that respect, but functional, which is the main thing. Now the thing about Fords is they're not well built for precision quality, and the indicators, literally you have to move it quite a bit to actually get it to indicate. I mean, look how much play there is in that. Good quality that is. And obviously the wiper stalk over here, as typical settings, you've got your screen wash for operating the front and rear screen wash. I think you have to pull it forward for the screen wash anyway. For the wipers, it's basically slow, fast, very fast. There's nothing in between on those three settings. That's the best way I can describe that switch, and we'll probably show that on the test drive. Underneath, I've got like this little kick plate. Excuse me, camera, focus in. Sorry gents, there we go. We have two pedals, being an automatic, and we have this kick plate with the OBD port access point. There is a point knowing that down here we have an access point, if you take that cap off, for the fuel cutoff. Door card wise, we have manual mirrors in this car, and we have front electric, which can be quite responsive. The motor has been changed in this particular window. Again, the door handle, you have to move the handle that far for it to open the door. Ugh. A bit of wear on this trim, as typical wear. Unfortunately, you can't get new ones. And central locking may not link up all the time. Sometimes I may shut this door and it may not link up. That's typical central locking motor faults. It's not a bad earth. My earths have all been done and it still does it, but today it's decided to work together, thank God. Down here we have some really generously sized door bins with this nice holder here. Oh, I forgot to mention that this is quite a foam padded door card, which is quite nice, quite cheap and tacky though, compared with modern cars. You have a speaker here, but this is quite a generous amount of space for a door pocket, to be honest with you. Obviously in this car, sorry about the mess, because this is a bit of a park. You have these genuine focus rubber mats. Now these are not something that everybody got, and I've not seen many with these mats in, and I believe they are non-obtainable now. Then on the passenger side, it's more the same. You just get a single switch on this side. Obviously, sorry, I forgot to mention, you have this little trim, which you don't get on all models, but I believe certain sporty models like the Zetec would have got these trims on the door cards. As we make our way to this really interestingly shaped center console, if I just take you back here and then move you all the way forwards, look how it sort of goes into this shape and then it comes out to this shape. There's two different shapes molded into one console. Really interesting. You get some generously sized cup holders, which you can just pull out if you want, and some I think a little pen clip, which is quite nice actually. Nice little idea. We have the automatic gear selector, being the automatic model, with this big knob. It's quite nicely contoured for my hands. We have this big button down here, big green button, to turn the overdrive on and off when required, but I always keep it on. We have the gear selector down here. We've got this little clip here, which, believe it or not, you may not know why this is here, but if your car won't start for whatever reason, it's broken down and you need to tow it onto the tow truck, to get this out of park, because you can't, because it's a shift interlock, okay, because obviously the brake pedal switch, if I put my foot on the brake pedal, there we go, I can take it out. Now that brake pedal switch won't be operating, so therefore this knob won't release, it'll be stuck. You put a screwdriver in there and it'll basically release the selector into neutral or gear to get you to tow it onto the recovery truck, which is why that is there. And then further down here, we have the heated seat switches, which was obviously something of an optional extra with these leather seats. You only got them on certain models. Otherwise, this would be completely blank. This blanked off switch is for what would be the traction control on much more higher spec models. It is something of an occasion that these heated switches don't work, or the elements have burnt out in the seats. That is quite a common issue. They can be repaired with eBay kits, I believe. As we come back here, we have the very nicely covered handbrake lever with this cheap vinyl sort of handbrake gaiter. It feels quite clunky and quite, you know, typically Fordish. You know, the knob moves quite away, but it feels quite sturdy. And then back here we got this nice little ashtray which was provided. Obviously people still smoke in 1998. And then you've got, obviously you can take it out and create a bit more space for lots of gubbings, and at the back you have another 12-volt socket for the rear passengers. And a final thing really, you do have some adjustment here for the passenger seat and the driver's seat down here, and also where my hand is, there is some adjustment for the driver's seat height. Yeah, quite interesting really. The driver's seat height, by the way, if I just get out the car, it is set in the lowest position, right? But it is still quite high. The driving position in the car is quite high. I believe they designed it in that sense because of the MPV market, which was basically taking over bit by bit really. Hatchbacks were becoming slightly less popular. So I think certain design features, like the amount of space that you get inside the car and the higher driving position, would have suited many customers and certainly attracted many. The driving position isn't too high, it just feels comfortable, and that's how I would put it, and that's what you want from a hatchback. Now to get to the rear seats, we just had this little pull cable. Sometimes these can break, so be very careful with these if you've got the pull type seats on the 3 doors. And you just see some really nicey comfy bat seats. There isn't really more to say. I mean, they've got a big door bin down here next to your speaker. There isn't really much to say, but I'll tell you what, let's get in the back of it. Now, if we get into the back seat, now that is with the driver's seat all the way to the back, so this is a big person driving the car like myself with big legs. Yeah, there's still adequate amount of room for a 6'3" driver and a 6'3" passenger behind him. I mean, I've got plenty of headroom here. I don't feel crammed in whatsoever. It's just remarkable how much space there is and how much packaging. It's almost as good as the packaging in the original Mini, and I say that very heavily indeed. The original Mini was perfect for the packaging and making the use of space. I think this car also makes the use of a lot of decent space. Obviously the higher roof makes a massive advantage there, but there is more than enough room for 2 fully sized adults and a medium passenger in the middle, which is all the more remarkable really, considering the space at the boot, which we're now going to look at very soon. There are only really a couple of problems with this car that you will commonly find now, and that is collapsed driver's seat bolsters. Luckily, this one is off a passenger seat that I took from another car. So that's a top tip for you. You can swap the slabs over quite easily, but they do collapse here and you'll get signs of wear. The seats will probably need to be re-dyed if they've not been re-dyed, because they will be looking shabby by now. Same with the leather steering wheel. It can be re-dyed like this one, but they can go very scabby, but they just need a sanding pad and some new dye. Also, quite an issue with the door cards is this bubbling effect. You will get it, you'll just need to re-glue it down. It won't ever look perfect, but it will look decent. Broken or missing clips. Focus Mark 1s were never good for this sort of quality. And obviously bits of trim that are worn like this, like the driver's side one, which always wears here because this is where you put your hand, but you can't really get new ones, so second-hand ones are very sought after at the moment. Well, you could have the 3-door version like mine, the 5-door hatchback, the saloon, the estate. Well, I'm biased. I prefer the 3-door Focus for the sports look that you get from particularly this rear window slant. If you want the 5-door, that's best for a family car. If you want the estate, that's definitely the workhorse. If you want the saloon, which is a bit of a strange part of the market really, almost like the same market that the Ford Orion left many years ago, Maybe that's what they intended for the saloon, just to fit in that gap in the market, but it wasn't really as successful. Right, I'm just going to take you through the models just to outlook some of the specifications of the range. The first up is the CL model, which is the poverty spec model. There isn't much that comes with it, as you can see. Maybe some 14-inch steel wheels, which look really small on the car. You've got some electric windows at the front on later models, but they were wind up on the earlier ones. A radio cassette player, believe it or not. Most of the panels were matte black, or you didn't even get trims on the doors. So very little to add to these cars. They don't have a middle rear headrest, something you may not spot. And also they had this central locking, using the technique I call turning the key in the door. Hey presto. Next up is the LX model, which was quite a popular car in terms of Mark 1 sales figures. You got 15-inch alloy wheels on the 2001 onwards cars. The earlier cars had steel wheels, believe it or not. You also got front electric windows and electric adjustable door mirrors. You had a CD radio, which I've got in my Zetec. You have manual air conditioning and Ford's patented front heated windscreen, which was really nice back in the day. Now it's been copied by everybody, but that is generally what you got. Very nice indeed. Well, you also got this central locking with a remote fob. Wow, that will save a lot of repetitive strain injuries. Another feature is double deadlocking. So it's one click to lock, second click to double deadlock. Even I can't get out now. That's a good feature. Then we have the Zetec trim, which has the following features: front fog lights, heated leather seats, very plush, a leather rimmed steering wheel, graphite effect speedo dials, and you also have sports suspension, which quite frankly there's minimal difference between this and the standard suspension. And also, as some of you may have noticed, this is the 16-inch 5x2 alloy wheel. You got 15 inches as standard on the Zetec, but these were an option on the 2-litre petrol models only. The only modification that this car has, by the way. They look very nice, they sit nicely on the car and are very desirable. We have a top of the range gear model, as been denoted on many Fords for many years. It comes with 15-inch 12-spoke alloy wheels, which look quite smart, and then all the body mouldings on the side, the door handles, maybe the radiator grille there, colour coordinated to the body. In the car we have front and rear electric windows with global closing. The fascia has this fake wood trim along the fascia, the centre console and the doors. We have electronically controlled climate control, basic climate control, much better than the manual air conditioning. CD auto changer, with the auto changer being under the passenger seat. I think it's 6 CDs. There's a few more toys here and there. You've got the electrically adjusted driver's seat and armrest and lumbar support. If you had a 2-litre, you also got a trip computer up here, rear disc brakes, anti-lock brakes, traction control, and mainly that's it really. And on the top of the range model ST170, you've got these lovely 17-inch 15-spoke alloy wheels and these body coloured mouldings like the gear models, slightly different headlights, and inside obviously you've got these lovely electroluminescent dials, which are really cool. A 6 CD auto changer. I think you've got air conditioning, that sort of thing, and obviously half leather trim, half leather seats with the door cards to match. If you wanted Recaro leather seats, you would need to pay that as an optional extra. They weren't standard on these cars. You got some sort of different coloured style fascias, and that's really generally it for the ST170. I think you got some scuff plates in some areas. In the range there are 4 petrol engines, the renowned Zetec family, very well known for being very refined and very powerful and pretty economical for their age, and 2 diesel models. We're going to have a look under the bonnet in the most unique way ever by putting the key under the badge. What a nice feature that is. The first of the engines is the 1.4 1.6 Zetec SE engine, which is better known as the Ford Sigma engine, which first came out in 1995 in the Ford Fiesta as a 1.25. It came out with plastic, is designed with a plastic intake manifold and powder coated piston rods, which I believe are a couple of firsts on an engine this size in a mass produced car. It lasted all the way in production until 2017 and was manufactured at Bridgend in Wales. A very durable and well proven engine. The first of the engines, the 1.4 litre version, which was mostly seen on the lower spec CL models, which was kind of proven to be a little bit underpowered for this size of car, came with 75 brake horsepower and 123 newton meters of torque. And here we have the 1.6 Zetec SE engine, which was the most popular and common engine fitted on a Mark 1 Focus, providing decent fuel economy and decent performance at 100 brake horsepower and 145 newton meters of torque. The main point of focus with these engines, both the 1.4 and the 1.6, is to check and make sure that the engine oil level is good and quality oil is in there. Usually they can leak from the rocker cover gasket. That's not a problem, it's easy changed. Sometimes they do have a habit of burning through their piston rings, so you may see a bit of smoke out the back. But the most important thing is quality oil changes and a timing belt change at the regular interval of 10 years or 100,000 miles. Then you have the 1.8 and 2 litre petrol engines, which are most widely known as the Ford Zetec engine or Zeta engine, which was first introduced in 1991 in the Ford Mondeo and used in the previous Escort. It was Ford's first ever double overhead camshaft design that went into mainstream production, replacing all the old Pinto engines. The main difference between the Zetec engine and the Sigma engine being that the Zeta engine had a cast iron block and the Sigma was all aluminium, much lighter. The other difference being the inlet and exhaust being the opposite way around. The 1.8 Zetec engine produced around 115 brake horsepower and 160 newton meters of torque. Very much a performance engine, but be wary of the gearbox if there are any clunks or bangs, as the gearbox in the 1.8 is at the limit of its torque capacity, so something to be very careful of. And then you have the 2 litre Zetec engine, the range topper, which produced about 130 brake horsepower and 174 newton meters of torque or hereabouts. It was an option on only the gear models and the Zetec models. And then not forgetting the 2 litre duractec-st as fitted to the ST170. Essentially not much different from the 2 litre engine, apart from having a Cosworth tuned cylinder head with higher compression, larger valve, variable valve timing and forged conrods. And I believe it produced around 173 brake horsepower, not 170, it produced a little bit more than that, and 196 newton meters of torque, so the performance getter of the model range. And then you've got the 2 diesel engines in the drive, both 1.8 litre engines, the TDDI and the TDCI, both known as the Lynx engines. Early cars have the old school TDDI engine, mostly used in the Transit, featuring a turbocharger, fly-by-wire throttle and a rotary style distributor pump. An extremely reliable unit producing 90 brake horsepower and 178 newton meters of torque. Rarely does anything go wrong. You can expect very high mileages on these engines. And in 2001, as I'll show you in the brochure, Ford came up with the TDCI Duratort unit in 2001 as a result of the increasing emission standards being thrown towards every single diesel and petrol car going. It comes with common rail diesel technology, which was very new at the time. I think a few manufacturers had done it 5 or 6 years previous. This unit produces about 100 brake horsepower and 240 newton meters of torque, which is very healthy for a 1.8 of that age. Nothing really goes wrong with these diesel engines as before, but you have to check for possible injector failure. See and have a look at the service history to see whether they've been replaced, because they can throw their injectors. On the 1.4, 1.6 and 1.8 petrol engines, you gained Ford's 5-speed IB5 unit, which was first launched in 1995 and was specifically designed for Ford's new hydraulic clutch system and in low torque applications. As I said previously, it is a very reliable gearbox, but in the 1.8 petrol model, it is on the limit of its torque capacity, and many times down the years have gearboxes failed because of people basically using the 1.8 as it should be, to be honest. So be very careful of that particular issue. On the diesel and 2-litre petrol models, you have Ford's MTX75 unit, launched in 1992 and was designed for Ford's larger front-wheel drive models with higher torque demands. Very robust gearboxes, and they have very little issues. Then on the ST170 you have the 6-speed Getrag transmission, which is designed to cope with high levels of torque. The gearbox again has minimal issues, however it has been a strong complaint that the gear ratios are far too close together for decent progress. The 1.6 and 2-litre petrol models came with the option of Ford's 4F27E automatic transmission as fitted in this example, which you can just about see. Starting life in 1991 as a Mazda transmission, Ford updated it for use in their smaller cars in low torque applications, so no good for towing, believe you me. Featuring torque converter lockup and fully electronic control, this is a pretty smooth transmission and is relatively trouble free. At the front of the car, it's pretty conventional suspension. It's Matheson strut suspension, very little to go wrong really, but with age and deterioration comes rust and comes saggy springs, particularly on the diesel models where it'd be obvious if they're sagging, where it'd be much tighter than this at the front. This is exactly how they should sit. Coming to the rear suspension, at the time that this car was launched, every smaller car used torsion beam suspension, which was the norm. But the feeling from the design team to give that class-leading ride quality is that a multi-link rear suspension would be needed. And they called it the control blade rear suspension. The control blade being a trailing arm but of much thinner steel, allowing it to flex under the car's load when travelling through a corner, for instance, allowing it to take up the longitudinal forces that were placed on it. The lateral movement of the suspension being controlled by 3 separate control arms, the rear arms having the spring mounted on top of them and the shock absorber mounted directly from the body to the back of the hub itself. And that essentially gives you the geometry of double wishbone but the compactness of train arm suspension all in one package, so it gives massive boot space and it transforms the ride and handling. At this age, it is worth noting that one, the train arm bushes will probably need doing if they haven't already been changed, because they can separate from their metal mounting. Secondly, the control arms they will at this age have bush issues where they can move too much. They are supposed to move but not too much, so check for movement. And thirdly, the rear arms that the springs mount on can corrode at the bottom so badly that the springs could actually push through and crack the arm, and in some cases the arm will split and dig into the road, and that's fatal. So do check that out if you're looking to buy one. Now what you can see underneath the rear bumper is this. So you have the spring mounted on the rear arm. This is the arm you need to check for corrosion. It corrodes just here, so make sure that you check that out. You can just about see the other linkages through there. We've got the anti-roll bar bush that may need to be looked at if it hasn't already been done so, but I will make a video of this in a more detail manner in the future. Original front and rear Ford bumpers can crack with age. Ford bumpers are made from an inferior plastic and not ABS as adopted by many other manufacturers, so it is worth looking for cracks, particularly around where it meets the front wing at the back and anywhere on the rear bumper. Also, check the bottom of the front wings. They can rot out, commonly at the bottom there. It's not a massive issue. Replacements can be sought quite easily, and they can also rot where they meet the front wing just there. Also, the bottom of the doors on either 3-door or 5-door models, or any model really, they can rot out at the bottom, so check for signs of bubbling on the outside and check on the inside, and make sure the drain holes are not bunged up. It is important that water runs through them. Another common rot spot on this car is towards the rear of the sill, where they can go as far up as the door there. They can also go and extend further up if rot spreads, but usually it starts here, so check all this area, including the arch lip. Now, as you can see, my car no longer has its carpet liners. They were removed years ago, and they are known to cause issues where they absorb moisture, hold the water against the metal, and the metal commonly rots in this spot here, where you can see where it's focused in. This has been plated previously on this side and that side. This is where it rots, but you can't see this because the carpet's in the way, so get it off and have a look underneath. It's really important you do so. Open the boot using the remote key. If it doesn't open with either the key or the tailgate switch next to the instrument cluster, then you will have a break in the wiring loom, most likely where it goes into the boot. In that case, your heated screen and your wiper may not work either at all. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so opening the boot up, we have a really spacious boot considering the size of the car, lots of room. We've got this lovely carpet here covering up the spare wheel with the emergency jack underneath. Do check for water in this well, because that could indicate a leak. I'll just go through that in a second. Up here we have where the loom goes through into the boot. The wires can break at this junction, so if you have any problems with the as I say, with the boot not opening, or the wipers not working, or the heated screen not working, or intermittent faults, get this grommet off and check this wiring. It's important. Headlining can go a little bit as it's gone in this, but they're not really known for the headlining to sag on Focus Mark 1s. They're pretty well built. But the usual leaks, in terms of leaks, water leaks, Focus Mark 1s are very common for this. They can leak into the boot well. It's usually the rear light seals on the side down here. They can leak in, just a bit of silicone seal will sort that. They can leak from the rear lights into the cabin through this plastic shroud here, and they can also leak through the striker plates where the bolts are not tightened up, or a little seam here. There's several places they can get in. It is a particularly bad issue on Mark 1s for boot leaks, but apart from that, there really isn't any problems at all. There were numerous special limited editions made available throughout production, most of which are getting extremely rare now. This includes the Millennium, the only Focus painted in yellow, the Zetec collection with its unique style front bumpers that everybody seems to want, the black, the silver, chic, Ellie, ebony, the MP3 with its very nice wheels, the Sport TDCi, and then we have the two run-out models, the Flight and the Edge, which are more common towards the end. I think that's about it. Well, any car between £500 and £900, and not just Mark 1 Focuses, they're going to require some severe repairs to keep going in the long term. It's best to be a short-term car, because particularly Mark 1s at that price point, you're looking at various states of rust and expensive work to be done, so best be wary about that price bracket. Well, in the 900 to 1600 pound category, you're more likely to get a much better example. In fact, probably a very good example. The bodywork might be tatty in places, but is relatively solid. It doesn't need any welding at this present time, but may do so in the short distant future. Mechanically solid with very few issues, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a decent, honest runner for that price. Well, you're looking in the 1700 plus category, and that will be for the finest examples that are on the roads today. Examples that very much are very solid, need very little in the way of paint work and mechanical work, very few to next to no issues. Maybe low mileage, maybe it's got very well documented history, even the original bill of receipt, that's always nice. Just little things like that. That's what you're looking at. Well, if you want an ST170, they can fetch anything from £1,000 to £3,000 for the best examples. If you have an ST170 estate, there's only 95 of them currently on the roads according to the DVOA. So if you have one of them, towards the upward figure of that, I would think. If someone describes their car as being rust free in an advert, then quite frankly, Mark 1 or otherwise, they're lying. There's no such thing as a Mark 1 Focus that is rust free. They all rust to varying degrees, and you need to look and inspect certain areas that I've pointed out very carefully. As a rule of the thumb, the early examples tend to be better. The later ones, 2002, 2003 models, particularly affected by severe rust issues, so be aware of that. Short answer, no. Mark 1s are not cheap cars to run if you intend to look after them. If you don't, then that's another question. But if you want to look after one, then you're going to have to budget for repair work, body work, maybe a bit of paint. It's running costs that you're going to have to think about. Parts are not too bad to get hold of. You have to be aware that some parts now are becoming virtually obsolete, certain trim parts, but most mechanical parts you can get at the motor factors within 1 to 3 days, so no problems there. According to the DVOA, about 84,000 are currently on the road today, which is still a considerable number considering the car is 17 to 24 years old now. It's a very old car, but there are still plenty about. But numbers are plummeting rapidly and have been for a few years, and I say that will continue for a few more years yet. So the time to get hold of one is definitely in the next year or so. I think it's fair to say this car was just miles ahead of the old Escort and all the competition in 1998, and was still ahead some years later. It took the Golf a few years to come up with a solution to rival this car and other manufacturers. It won the European and North American Car Awards in 1999, and towards the end of production was still a really strong seller. In total, around 780,000 were registered in the UK alone. I couldn't imagine the figures for Europe. It completely changed the perception of what a family hatchback could bring to the table in terms of almost everything you could want from one. And it arguably just has had as much as an impact as the original Mini and VW Golf, and that is a strong claim to fame. I do hope you've enjoyed this strange buyer's guide style review of what is one of the most iconic cars that this country has ever seen in the last 25 years. Certainly a car that everybody can relate to, and it was virtually on every single street when I was growing up. So definitely as a millennial, it means a lot to me. And I hope that more people start to become more aware about how good a car it is, as not just a car, but now as a modern classic, because that's what it is. As simple as that. And as usual with these YouTube videos, if you did enjoy this video, please click like. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to, because I'm going to be doing more videos on anything related to a Mark 1 Focus. I've already put quite a few videos up. Hopefully I'll be able to get some more cars. We'll see very soon, funds pending. If you have got a comment, just drop a comment, even if it's to tell me that no, you got your facts wrong, Andrew. Please do, I don't mind. See you in a bit, guys. Take care.